Um, so I am going to review the read aloud I did in the video. I watched it a couple times, which is always kind of hard to watch yourself talking. Like I always just cringe at hearing my voice, but it was also fun to go back and listen to some of the comments my students made, and especially with critiquing, I know it's really critical for teachers in general to look back at videos of themselves teaching, just because um, I know that my perception of when I'm teaching is so different than probably what's actually coming out of my mouth and the way I'm acting. So looking back on it really helps for making intentional corrections. But yeah, I'm just going to go through the questions from part B. So share the title of the book and your rationale for choosing this particular book for this experience. So I chose Let Them Play by Margot Thace Raven. Let me see where I put the book. Here. And I chose this because it's very fitting and relevant with Black History Month. It's a story about Black resilience and Black excellence, and it's important that I continue to celebrate these stories and accomplishments. Although it's not a true story, it does resonate with a lot of the struggles of Black Americans during this time, Black children, Black athletes. Yeah, just because it's about an all-Black Little League team, the only Black Little League team in South Carolina, and the team is invited to play with other white teams. The white teams boycott because they don't want to give this team the opportunity to play against them, and it just really evokes and heightens issues of racial segregation, intolerance, oppression into the classroom, into the space, which we have been talking about a lot, and just focusing on not only historical events but also current events. So I like my students to be able to make connections between these stories and also with current events in their current lives, and just not only like making that connection of oppression, but also uplifting that positive light of resilience and empowerment, especially. Number 2, describe your process in preparing for your read aloud. So how specifically did you prepare? I read the book again through, even though I've read it a couple times, and I marked sticky notes in the book, both online and then also in my physical book, about where to stop, and then will have questions written down, or I'll also have think alouds, in which I make a point to like really voice out an emotion that I'm feeling, or voice out a thought, so that maybe students can also kind of connect with me on that, think the same thing or think differently. Just really have them put in perception about like what's going through my mind during this moment. And so that was mostly what I did to prepare. I think I probably could have gone through a couple more times, like maybe recorded myself doing it and then watched it. I think that's something I'll try and do next time, definitely. And then 3, how did you feel before you started the read aloud? I was a little nervous, to be honest. I haven't really done a lot of read alouds with my class, just because, which I do think I should more, because they're in 8th grade, but it is really valuable for them to interact and hear me reading. I've been reading our current book for English a lot in class, but not as much like with this energy and this conversation, more so like pretty straightforward and direct. So I think I was a little nervous, but then when I started reading and I got to hear some of their voices and their participation, it was pretty fun, and they're a great bunch, so having them come off of mute and participate was really helpful. There was a lot of people who wrote in the chat too, but I always like to hear the voices. Yeah. Number 4, what were the children's reactions to the book before, during, and after? I have a lot of kids in the class, students, I'll say, because they're older, in the class who are very passionate about social justice and the idea of equity and equality. So I anticipated that there would be some good reactions in terms of the passion and the frustration and even like the motivation to create change. I anticipated that, and I definitely saw that. I would say before they were expecting a story on Black history, because I did kind of preface that. So they're probably prepared and honestly excited, because most of them do really like talking about these issues and socio-political concepts. And then during the book, I noticed a lot of anger and frustration with the story, which was harsh, which is hard to hear. So I always try to like I like that it ended on an optimistic note because it definitely kind of geared them into this frustration, like seeing this happen, but they also can see it happen in current time, like this oppression, although it's not as direct and explicit as it was back in the 50s and the 40s, it still implicitly exists within our country. And I think that finding that connection was definitely discouraging and frustrating for them, which I think at the end I made sure we discussed after and during, and it cut out because the video it can only be 15 minutes on YouTube, which is why it wasn't included. But when we ended up wrapping up the book, it really highlighted resilience, Black resilience, like I said, Black empowerment and strength and courage within this community. So I think that was also very inspiring to people, and it ended up concluding, those feelings of frustration on definitely a more positive note, and it paired those feelings in a way that hopefully that powerful ending, was reminding them that it's more important to remain cognizant and remain empowered and resilient in these times and prepared of how to act in a situation like this. Number 5, share what you feel were your strengths and challenges throughout this read aloud experience. So I wrote that challenges promoting, this is kind of a challenge and a strength. So within my class, it's definitely a challenge consistently all around to promote student voice, people to come off of mute and share, and just have this confidence in speaking off on the Zoom, because it is a uncomfortable, like very virtual environment. So it's definitely different than it would be in the classroom. And it's gotten better, but it's still not as active as I'd want it to be. So throughout the read aloud, I was getting a lot of participation in the chat, which was great, just from those quieter voices, and I'm glad they had that opportunity. But it's still a challenge trying to get them off of mute. But I also would pair that with kind of a strength of mine, is that I've gotten a lot better with warmly calling people. So if they say something in the chat and I say, like, Gabriella, I really like what you put in the chat, could you please come off of mute? And it's definitely helped allow people to come and share aloud a bit more, but it's definitely still a challenge. A strength I would say is that I think that I read pretty well in terms of energy and comments, and I did a lot of think alouds. I would say a strength was like when I was voicing my emotions to them and really spelling out how I was feeling and why. It's super important for their social emotional learning to hear an adult or a model or someone model that out. So I did that a lot, which I thought was good. And then number 6, what could you do differently to improve your next read aloud? I said this earlier, but I think I would record myself before and hear myself speak, just to get a better idea instead of just watching it for the first time now. I think it would be better now that I'm hearing it to do it again. It was a little choppy because I do get kind of frantic, like my hands, and when I'm speaking I like it super I don't know, frazzled sometimes. So just like taking a step back and calming down, I think that comes with more practice as well. And what did you learn about reading aloud to children? I think I learned that you need to create the most comfortable and empowering, I would say, like confident environment as you can, because if they're not comfortable with the subject or the classroom or the teacher or their classmates, getting them to speak is very difficult, and getting them to participate is very difficult. And having a quiet class, which I've learned, not necessarily from this read aloud, but other times, it's hard. And it's hard to feel fluid, and it's hard to feel like they're learning. It's just a lot of the teacher talking, which I do not like. So I guess just like next time also, now that I'm thinking about this, I'd want to like do maybe kind of like a warm up into the book, get us all talking before I start reading, so that people know what to expect a little bit more. And then once we have more casual conversation, we get into the book, I can expect more formal conversation, formal answers and participation from more students, just because we started off really easy and comfortable and then we got into the book, and hopefully that comfort will kind of stay with students. And then what did you learn about yourself as a teacher? Just how anxious I am to be in a normal classroom, probably. I've kind of realized that a lot. But I've really grown to love my students. They're so great. And even though we have been virtual this year, I still have been able to create a relationship with them, which I think says a lot about my teaching style. And I applaud myself for that, I guess. But I'm anxious to see them in person. And continue read alouds and just continue discussions. I love class discussions in those Socratic seminars. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. And I will pause